heading now to New Zealand. The government has developed ties to the future leadership of Joe Biden in the United States of America, determining the continuation of the allyship amongst the two countries. We have Eagle News correspondent Greg Besa for the story. Greg?
Sometime in November of last year, U.S. President-elect Joe Biden had a chance to talk to New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern over the phone, during which he conveyed his intention to reinvigorate the strategic relationship between their two countries when his presidential term begins after his inauguration on the 20th of this month. Ben Shadmanyan, a New Zealander and who studied a master's degree in strategic studies in New Zealand, has shared his thought on what would be the dynamics of the relationship between these two countries under the Biden administration.
So there are multiple factors that one needs to consider when it comes to United States and New Zealand relations. First thing is the US-China relations, and the other factor is how Trump viewed the presidency and the US foreign policy. Since the Trump's administration, we saw a shift in the lens of the US foreign policy view to more individualistic, more Trump-based, as opposed to conventional presidencies that it was more diplomatic based. Coming back to the question, I believe that the US-New Zealand relation is determined by the US policies on China and how China is active in the South Pacific region and how they have relationship with the Australia. But it's extremely important to mention that the United States and New Zealand and Australia and Canada and Britain, they're all part of the Five Eye network. Yeah. So it's not going to be a drastic change. And I believe personally that the US-New Zealand relations since Trump hasn't changed much, but the language of diplomacy shifted. Okay. It became more, as anyone would know, that Trump had more hand-on, Twitter-based or personal-based policy as opposed to the secretariat or conventionally. So I think the relations will be good as they are, or they may extend. But as I said, we are going through a very turbulent times with the COVID response, and then we have the issue of South China Sea. So New Zealand is left in the middle as far as the US-China relation goes, because New Zealand relies a lot on both US and China when it comes to trade. Any administration that is taking over the predecessors, they have this language of narrative. Okay. That we're gonna make the relations better than the last administration. Yeah. Of course, this US election hasn't been the normal US elections that we've seen in the past few years. So by what Biden meant that we're gonna work towards a better relationship between US and New Zealand. But that's the language that's the narrative on how Biden is trying to say that we will if the relationship between the Trump and the New Zealand was this, I'm gonna make it even better. Okay. So it's legacy creating and legacy demolishing.
For the years, New Zealand has been a strong and dependable ally of the United States of America in dealing with global issues, even during the challenging years of the Trump administration. It is highly expected that it remains such under the Biden administration. Reporting for Eagle News New Zealand Bureau, this is Greg Besa. We live in interesting times.